Good morning. Oops, yes. With respect, we acknowledge the Nevada County campus of Sierra College as the traditional and unceded homelands of the Nisenan peoples. For countless generations, the Nisenan have carried out their responsibility as stewards of this place, originally known as Daspa. Sierra College commits to an ongoing relationship with the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe and their future generations, who are an integral part of the Sierra College community. I'm Judy East, and I'm chair of the Nevada County Council of Sierra College Foundation, who is thrilled to produce and sponsor this event for you today. We've started the forums last August, and we have one more in May, and then we're taking a break because the college is closed on Fridays in June and July, and we'll come back. And we hope that you've enjoyed hearing all about the community topics. I do have an email list that I'm going to send around. If you haven't signed it and want to be notified about our forums, please sign it. The foundation, the council and the foundation puts about $20,000 into the campus every year. We sponsor graduation ceremonies, scholarships, emergency fund. Sometimes a student can't get to school because their tire is flat and they need a new tire and they don't have the money. So the emergency fund will help our students with that. We also have a 7th grade day where we bring students from 3 of the middle schools up to Sierra College here. We give them a half a day experience of college, and they go home knowing that they can go to college right in their community. We have supported scholarships by helping students write their essays. We sponsor the art awards, the lecture series. We are also bringing back our fundraiser, A Day for Women, on September 14th. We are also working at doing an alumni association for Nevada County residents, and there's some information on that table for the Alumni Association and for the foundation. If you have never been on this campus, please, after the forum, take the time to go up and see how beautiful this campus is and how well your tax money has been spent. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Cheryl Dell. Can you hear me all right? Thank you so much for coming this morning, and I do want to echo what Judy just said. It's a gorgeous day to be on campus, so thanks for coming out and spending the next hour or so with us. You can see the setup, so I'm going to give those of you who are looking at my back, if you'd rather not, a chance to just move to this side. If you don't want to, that's fine too. My back really is my best feature. But I'll give you a chance to do that while I'm doing introductions here. It is really my pleasure to be here this morning and moderate this panel on the local media. And I'm joined by 3 leaders of the local media this morning, so let me do the introduction. Let's start on the end here. This is Chad Wingo. Chad is the current publisher of the Union. He's been with the Union for almost 11 years, and in his current role for 15 months. My, how the year flies. He moved to Grass Valley in 2007. He and his wife, Heidi, and by the way, Heidi was recently promoted to the executive director position of Hospice of the Foothills, have 4 children, 3 dogs, and 2 cats. They're also co-owners of the Grass Valley Brewing Company. Next is Scott. Scott Robertson joined several other local leaders to buy the Nevada County Broadcasters, Inc., you know it as KNCO, in 1995. Though he's probably best known for other things, like his skill as an incredible CPA. In 1987, he started the firm that today is called RWS. He's served on the board of dozens of nonprofit and for-profit boards in the area, and in 2006, he purchased the Bullard Bar Reservoir Marina. Scott has lived in Nevada County since 1981. He's married to Deborah, and they have 3 sons, all of whom are in their 30s. And all of his kids work and play in Nevada County. Ooh, hopefully this will be an issue. If it is, I'll grab a cordless. And then we have Pascal Fusshaller, who just goes by. You want to hand me a mic? What do you think, Dorian? Should I switch? Okay. Okay. Let's do this. Well, this is gonna. Hello. Hello.
Shall we try this one?
This is going to make it easier for me to moderate because I really can cut these guys off when I go grab a mic, right? Anyway, Pascal, who likes to joke that she goes by one name like Cher and Madonna, grew up in TV studios in Luxembourg and decided to never, ever, ever do anything remotely related to journalism. That resolution lasted just past her 18th birthday, and since 1999, she and her spouse, Susan Levitz, have run Ubinet. Pascal's job title is editor and other duties as assigned, and like the case with most big titles like that, it really is the other duties that take a lot of her time. She says she's addicted to news and coffee, so welcome to all three of you. Thanks for being here. I'm going to divide today's conversation into two segments because we do have so many panelists. The first segment is going to be just where are we at now? There have been a lot of changes in the media landscape, and I want to spend some time allowing everybody to be on the same page with where we are now. And then the second segment aligns with the title, and that's just where we're going. I just want to give you all a heads up that not everyone is going to answer every question. We just don't have time for that because I do want to get into some deeper conversations. But hopefully you'll get a sense of their individual media here and the landscape as a whole. And then I was joking about it, but they all know because they've all moderated things just like I have. I really will interrupt to keep us moving. So if someone gets long-winded, they're expecting me to be rude. I hope you won't take it that way. All right, so here we go. I do want to start by asking each of the three panelists in this Where Are We Now to just talk about your operation and the biggest changes you've seen over the last couple of years. Do we want to try this, Mike? Nope.
Okay, yep, there we go.
Okay, well, you have the mic. Why don't you start, Scott?
So COVID obviously was a big issue for, I think, all media, and certainly for us. Just an example, Gold Country Casino was a big advertiser for us. Well, clearly they were closed. I mean, they weren't open, so they didn't advertise. So we saw a pretty significant hit in our advertising. Luckily, the federal government and the state government had a lot of programs that helped us through. There's no question they put a lot of money in our pockets and kept the thing alive. And today I can say that we're stable. We're heading in the right direction for sure, and which is good news. But it was a rough couple of years. If you go back historically, when the car dealerships left, that was a big hit for all local media. And then again, we've had a lot of local businesses that have sold out. Their kids didn't want to take them over. The one example I like to use is Plaza Tire, just recently sold to Big Brand. Well, Plaza Tire was a very good advertiser. They're no longer advertising, right? We lost that local. And so that's happening throughout our community because they're all aging out like I am, right? And they're moving on. And so that's kind of gives you a little bit of where I think the landscape's at.
That's great. And we're going to spend some substantial time today on the business model. But before we get there, Chad, what have been the biggest changes at the union over the last couple of years?
So I will echo the advertising revenue, absolutely. I was just recently fortunate enough to be a presenter on the Nevada County Youth Council. And what I tried to explain very pointedly to that group of young people is spend your dollars locally. It is local businesses that are spending money with your media. It is B&C. It's not Big Brand Tire. It's not Amazon with our 2-day delivery. It is Weiss Brothers Nursery. That's where we really need to be spending our voting money, is spending it in that local business. Now for the union specifically, in the last 2.5 years, 3 years we're going on now, we have had 2 changes of ownership. That is a wild situation to go through. There's 2 separate reorganizations that happened. We were held by Ogden Media for about 9 months, and it was never their intention to hold on to us. And then we have been with our current ownership for about 18 months. That has been a big change because we were owned by the Swift family for 47 years. So just going through a new ownership, a new publisher, really changes what you do and how you operate. We were asked to reduce staffing to make it, because again, these are for-profit businesses, to make their investment work. And then on top of that, the union, who is, we're a printed newspaper 5 days a week, putting out a new product 5 days a week, has moved to mail. And that has caused some discomfort, as you can imagine, with folks who like to have their paper with their morning cup of coffee. I guess many of us here, I'm sure, of that same sentiment. So that change right there and that adjustment has caused some discomfort and some reworking of how people consume their morning, maybe. But we are doing a fantastic job with that.
Okay, very good. And how about for you, Pascal? What have been the biggest changes in the last couple of years?
Well, I'd say that actually we're really lucky because we actually grew in the past 5 years or so. A major change for us was bring a change to a content management system that really works for a small operation like ours, and so that we can actually spend more time writing stories, getting the news out. And of course, well, you all know that we focus a lot on emergencies. Fortunately, last year was a very quiet year as far as fire goes, but need I say Snowmageddon? So 1 and 2. So for us, the growth has actually been there, and we're now at the point where we have a videographer, we have some stringers that actually work with us. We are at that point because for the longest time we did not even ask for subscriptions or advertising, and then it was like, you know what? If we build this out, because the cost, even the online news is not free. And that is something I really would like people to understand, that every outlet here, we all have costs. We have, be it the hardware, the software, the licenses. It's a lot of money every month that needs to be gathered, spent, and again, spending local. That is really, it's really the local media. If you support the local media, let's face it, there are not very many small rural communities that actually have the variety of local media that we have here. So we're all very lucky, and all of us, we do our job and we do it for you, but you know what? It's not free.
So I do want to get into the business model, and I should have said this to the audience too. As the panelists know, I'm going to have a combination of open and closed-ended questions, just so we can get some more data on the table. So what I'm hearing is, for all 3 of you, the economics have been a reality. I'm hearing that, the union and KNCO economics of actually, you're actually making less than you were a couple of years ago. Pascal, yes or no? Are you making more or less money than you were a handful of years ago?
Making money is a big word, but yeah, we are all, technically we're all for-profit businesses, we're corporations. The profit, well, I wouldn't call it a profit, but yes, we managed to cover our bills and bring in more people. So actually, yes, more.
Okay, so we've got a more, less. And then 2, both the union and UBNet have gone through system changes, which tends to be not very transparent to all of you, but you probably are sympathetic as you've changed out a computer system and upgraded. And you can only imagine doing that with your subscriber base or your content management base and your archives and that sort of thing. So that's also been a really huge change. But the community is changing around you, thus the changes in economics. So I want to take a second and have you just help us understand how you make the money you make. For all of you, it's some combination of individual readers or audience and advertisers. Scott, again, I'm going to have you go first because you're the cleanest, if I can use that. How do you guys make your money?
It's fairly simple. We have to go out and obviously knock on advertisers' doors and hope to sell them some commercial bank, and it's fairly simple. And I do have to say that one of the reasons that we bought the stations way back in '95 was that as a community, a few of us got together and said we really didn't want to see this owned by somebody outside the community because I know what would happen. We used to own KBA down in Yuba City, and that station was gutted when I sold it in 2012. In fact, we have 3 employees that used to work at KUBA that currently work for us. And that's probably what would happen if we were to sell to somebody outside. They would just gut it, and we bring in all the local news would go away, all the local just go away. Mm-hmm. And that's just a reality. But we didn't buy it to make money. We bought it to keep it in the community, and we've been successful. Next year is 30 years.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so 100% advertising. Chad, how does the union make money?
So historically, newspapers have had about a 75%, 80% advertising base, and then that 25% came from subscribers and what they pay on their monthly, 6-month, yearly subscription rates. Across all markets in the United States, that is shifting considerably. With the multitude of platforms for advertising has become so segmented and especially impacted in what we will refer to on this side of the table as legacy media, which is a nice way of saying older than hell. So we are now seeing newspapers that are maintaining more support is coming from the subscriptions. So right now we are shifting from, like I said, we were at probably 75-80% of our revenue came from advertisements. Now that is sliding down, and it's still the majority, but it is getting closer to 50-50 between advertising and subscription-based revenue.
Great. Thank you. And how about you, Bennett, Pascal?
For the longest time, it was 50-50. It is now, there is a little more digital advertising and some of the products that we came up with, but it is very close to 50-50, and it's advertising and voluntary subscription, so no paywall. It's if you value the info, and please subscribe. And I think for all of us, if we don't have the local or regional advertisers, there's no way that we could sustain it, so it goes back to the shop local.
Right. So, Pascal, do you have a larger audience today than you did 5 years ago?
The audience has become larger, and it is due to the fact that there's a lot of other legacy media that is no longer here. And news deserts are a real thing.
And I'll get into that in a second.
Yeah.
So, Chad, is your audience larger or smaller than it was 5 years ago?
I'm going to say it's a very similar size. What we do notice is people who no longer, I'm going to use a very nice way of saying age out of subscribing to the newspaper. We see that backfilled by people who are coming to the website. All 3 of us here have robust websites that will catch people. Obviously, we have a 5-day week printed, and that across the nation and the world, that is declining. That readership in the physical paper is just declining. That's the state of where we are at. So we have kind of shifted them from that physical paper to our online format.
To digital. And Scott, how about the station? I know you don't have the same kind of measurements for a radio audience, but are you up or down?
I would say we're probably the same.
About the
You know,
same.
and it's probably, out of the three of us, it's more difficult for us to find that number, right? We don't have the resources to go out and hire Nielsen, Arbitron, if you will, to do. And quite frankly, if they did, they would only put 10 people in the community with the stuff on, and who knows what those numbers really would be. But I can tell you that our website has a lot of traffic because of Shopping Show and Swap Shop. And so we can see it there for sure. And then the call-ins that we get from folks and people who stop by, there's no question there are people's listening. I don't think that's an issue at all. But how many? It's a tough call.
Yeah. So one of the things that did happen in this community during COVID is we had a lot of people move in from out of the area. And I won't ask this of all three of you, but anybody that wants to take it, how do you reach newcomers? I mean, you don't move into your house and automatically know where you go to get local news. How do you reach them? Or is that something you spend a lot of time worrying about? Chad?
For years, we've had a partnership with the Association of Realtors, and we have offered kind of an introductory subscription for people who are moving into the community to kind of introduce ourselves to them, and that's been one way. I think people who move into the community oftentimes will seek us out, all three of us. They are looking to get involved. They came from some place that they were likely involved before, and have, especially, we have a significant group of retirees in this community who now have time and the ability to give back. And so they are seeking out ways to do that and working with local agencies to news media outlets to see where those opportunities are, I think is really helpful to all of us.
And I suspect that you all would agree that having an emergency, as awful as it is for the community, does bring audience to each of you. And so that certainly is another way that people learn about local media. So I pulled some national numbers to share with you, and that is where communities by and large go to get their local news. This is not the case for a lot of communities that don't have these outlets, but for communities like ours nationally, about 1 in 5, 20%, tend to get their local news from local radio. 17%, so a little bit less, get their news from the local newspaper, and about 12% from local digital. So that's kind of the way it looks. I guess what I want to ask each of you to do is maybe have a brief comment on whether or not you think this community looks like the national landscape here, or whether you think our numbers look a little bit different. But mostly, I'd like for you to talk about how you determine what to cover that might make your people come to you more often. And Pascal, I'm going to start with you.
I think the first sentence of our editorial policy is, if you want people to read what you write, make it useful to them. So our tagline is, we deliver news to the Sierra, so that is deciding what to cover is, it's not always just the latest rumor on social media, because it's social media and rumors, I mean, yeah. But we decide to cover explainers because there are new people in the community that may or may not be familiar with, I don't know, wildfire preparation, that actually you have to have a go back here. And you have to be able to get the information in an emergency. So explainers is one thing that I think is very important, because a well-informed community is going to be more engaged, and people should be engaged. They should be engaged in their local government, local, state, national level, whatever, but they have to be engaged in the local government, and then explaining how things actually work. I mean, how to make a point before the city council, the board of supervisors. And then, of course, there are, every once in a while, I get this bug, and I will do a more in-depth series about a topic that I consider it has to be useful to the community. I mean, if it was just me, there would be a lot of, bird pictures. There would be a there would be a lot of like, oh hey, fire stuff. Hey, here's fire science. I love fire ecology and fire science, but it's not what the community needs. So.
And of course, you can measure that based
Yeah.
on what's happening on the site, right?
Yes.
So your journalistic value, if you will, is context and explanatory
Yes.
journalism.
It is.
Scott, this is not as fair to ask you because I don't want to make this point on your behalf. You and your partners make it a point to not influence the news decisions at KNCO, and you're quite proud of that. And I think that's something everyone here should really appreciate. But how are the decisions made at KNCO about who to bring on and what?
You know,
to
we
bring?
should, Chris Gilbert's sitting right here. He's our main man. He's the one that makes those decisions. And he's been doing this, how long, Chris? 40 years with KUVA down in Yuba City. And then he came up with and joined us in 2012, I guess, and from here. And it's been here ever since. And, you know, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. We had a little staff meeting, and it was kind of interesting, Chris's response, because I kind of posed this because you were going to pose the question. Well, I'm an owner, right? I'm not really in the day-to-day operations at all, and it's certainly not a full-time job for me. And Chris was talking a lot about the fact that he has access from relationships with all of the newsmakers, if you will, and he also wants audio. And every story has audio, and that's the challenge, you know. So he's not taking a piece of paper, which is just a flyer, if you will, in regards to an event, and taking that and making news out of it. You know,
Right.
He's got to talk to the people who actually wrote that flyer to make sure that it has context.
Absolutely. And how does the union decide what to cover?
There's been a hair on this thing that has been driving me nuts, so that's gone. Historically, the union has had what we call pillars of coverage: government, education, environment, recently cannabis, of course. And so we have those things that we kind of like to make sure that we hit. Wildfires, of course, and I kind of want to point out right here, we have Elias Funes right here in the hat is our fantastic editor, right next to Marianne Bolsey, one of our staff writers who attends more governmental meetings than anyone should ever have to do. So I would like to thank them both for being here. Aren't they? Not dry at all. No offense, Bob. No offense. They're fantastic. And so I think that Pascal kind of hit on it. You look at the utility. You know, we get a million tips through the course of a year. None of us have the staffing to cover every single story, however interesting it may be, that comes in. So you really have to look at how impactful is this going to be? Is this going to be a broad audience appeal, or is this something that, 12 people are going to care about? Like Pascal said, it would be birds and, tennis on the site if it were up to her. So you really have to look at your audience and make sure that you are giving them the content that they are wanting. And again, with a diminished editorial staff compared to what we had, a handful of years ago, it can be hard. We are very, very fortunate that we have as many contributors that constantly supply us with content and different pieces of coverage that we can then allow our editorial staff to not focus on that. But it really kind of goes back to what does our what does our audience want to hear about? What is most important to them? What is most pressing?
And I'm going to, as we pass the mic back to Pascal for the next question, just sort of jump in and add that one of the changes for all media right now is that anyone with a digital presence, you can see what kind of impact you're making based on the readership of your story, and you can see in real time. And that's really different than the old days when you would have an editor making that decision. I remember when we pulled a local chess column, and I got about 150 calls from people that couldn't imagine that we were going to pull chess, and they were quite passionate about it. That's helpful, but if it's 150 out of a readership that is, 100 times that, it doesn't really tell you the whole story. And now you actually have data to help you make those decisions. As we're talking about that, Pascal, I wonder if you could share an example of a local story. And by the way, I'm just picking Pascal because she's closest to me. Every one of these media could do the same thing. But an example of a local story that you reported that made a difference in the community. Like, why does journalism matter?
Journalism matters. Okay. Do you remember the fencing that went up in Memorial Park in Grass Valley when the magenta drain, all of a sudden there was fencing up? I was looking for something very different, and I found a letter from the State Water Control Board to the city of Grass Valley, and the letter was 4 years old, and it said, you have to immediately put this up because there's toxic stuff in the water that comes down. It was before all the water treatment plants, etc. After some back and forth with the city of Grass Valley, who said, no, we didn't get it, and I'm like, yes, you did, because you signed for it, now here's the copy. I had set a deadline of noon that day, and I believe at 11:45 or so, the city of Grass Valley sent out a health advisory for everybody to stay away from that drainage where dogs and kids had played for years. Or Measure W. The Measure W, after a marathon meeting, it was hours and hours and hours, the Board of Soups decided to, yes, we will put Measure W on the ballot. And then I read the text of the ballot measure, and it wasn't cannabis, outdoor cannabis grow, yay or nay. The text of the ballot measure was cleaning up the existing ordinance. And nobody had noticed because it took exactly 37 seconds after these hours of debate to do like, oh yeah, we have to put it on the ballot. 37 seconds later, it was on the ballot. So that's why local journalism matters, because we're here, we're on the ground, and that's where all of you come in too, because we don't get news by osmosis.
Right. And I do, before we leave this, I just am going to do a quick kind of nod because I know the answer. All of you are more than happy to interact with your audience on good stories and report on them. Yes? Yes. So you do have a role in that, and you can influence that, and I know they welcome your calls. I want to switch for a second, following this Why Journalism Matters, to some sobering numbers about what Pascal referred to as a news desert. And a news desert is simply a community that doesn't have access to local news. And over the last number of years, the news deserts in our country has increased dramatically. Between 2005 and 2022, on average, 2 local newspapers a week closed. That's 2,500 fewer newspapers today than there were a handful of years ago. Unless you think that had something to do with COVID, in 2023, the number was actually higher. It increased to 2.5 newspapers, or about 130 that closed last year. The number of radio stations, local radio stations, that still have their license but that are silenced is equally sobering. And the number of digital sites that have come and gone, unlike Ubinet that's been around for 30 years, 25. Oh, sorry, 25 this year. I'm sorry. Yeah. Why did I write down 30? My listening skills aren't what they used to be. So 25 years, and the number of those are, very few and far between. In fact, Pascal and Ubinet is really a leader in this space. And so, and as sobering as those numbers are, the number of journalists reporting is even bleaker. So most communities have, hundreds fewer journalists than they did. The number is about 70%. And so now there's something in addition to this news desert that's called a ghost newspaper. And a ghost newspaper actually has a title, or a ghost radio station is the same thing. They're actually on the air, but with nothing local. It all comes from out of the area. And those are really increasing. So the Medill School of Journalism has done for years reporting on this, and they just started taking a look and projecting what might happen next. For California, they actually have, oh, and I should have said this, over half the counties in America do not have one local news source. So as we sit here with these three, and a fourth that, by the way, we didn't invite today only because I didn't want to juggle 4 panelists. That was just too much for me to handle, but who do a really good job. We are really lucky in this part of Nevada County to have 4. And I think that's one important point I really would like for you all to walk away with. But anyway, Medill has done this projection on where news deserts are going to occur over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. And in California, they've projected that 4 counties will be without any local news. That will mean all of the counties that have a news desert in California on the eastern side, some of which that are near Nevada County. So that's a long setup, and I apologize for hogging the mic, but hopefully that data is illuminating. I want to ask each of you what you see happening in our own county, or more specifically with your media over the next handful of years, 3 to 5 years. Chad, you want to start?
Hands here, Scott? That's fine. Those are stark numbers. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat those things, and none of us here are fortune tellers, and if there is one here, please see me afterward. We do a damn good job, these organizations up here, with reporting what's going on in this county. It takes passion. I'm going to say that. Our editorial staff is, and I have chills right now because I am so pleased with their dedication to this job. There is no one in the building at the union who is doing it for the money. I can tell you that much right now. They really have a passion for this. Historically smaller newspapers, such as us, we would have kids coming right out of college. Like, we would have them for, Elias, a year or 2 maybe, to kind of build their resume up and then go on to a broader market. Cheryl's exactly right. That just really isn't existing anymore. The state of our government, like, it has been allowed to allow the media to be vilified for honest reporting, which is just abhorrent. You have reporters that are scared to do their jobs because of backlash from one political side or another, and I'm not trying to make this a political issue, but frankly it is. So we have to do our absolute best to make sure that we are offering that wide coverage. And Elias and I kind of joke that we know we're doing well when we have an email from someone that's offended by a political cartoon because it's slanted one way, and then 2 days later we have someone who's on the other side of the political field opening an email with "how dare you." So, like, a high five, yay, we pissed everybody off. So we must be doing what we're supposed to be doing.
But Chad, let me put you on the spot. What major changes do you see over the next 3 to 5 years?
It's for us, it's going to be more reliant on subscribers and the folks in this room who are not business owners, that are not spending advertising dollars. It's going to be their willingness to come out of pocket for typically less than you pay for your Hulu subscription a month to support good quality local journalism. That's what it's going to take. The advertising revenue will come. It's very finite. I think that none of us look at ourselves as competitors. I think that we work in concert really well, but there is only so much advertising revenue to go around. And so with that being even more diminished, it is more reliant on our contributors who do it because of the passion of writing and bringing things into light at no cost.
So let me ask you a yes or no question here. You've just come through a major change with the change to mail. Do you have any other major changes that you see announcing in the next 6 to 12 months?
No.
Okay. Scott, how about you?
Good answer.
This is all off the record, right? Is that what
Yeah, that camera does. It's actually fake. So with KNCO, I mentioned earlier, it's going to be 30 years next year. It's time for the next generation to take over KNCO, and that's the bottom line. If we could bring in some 30-year-olds or some younger folks who have different ideas, obviously, my youngest son runs our marina, and what he's done in the last 5 years with that marina, I never saw it. I never saw it 5 years ago. We're so digital and technical now, the way we do business up there. And I think that's what needs to happen with KNCO, and I'm not the right guy to do it. It really needs to be that next generation, some folks stepping up and saying, hey, let's do this, let's do that. So I don't know exactly where it's going to go. I can tell you we'll still be around, but and probably in the same format that we are today. But what else are we going to be doing? That's the big question. And so I really want to put out there that into the community that we really are looking for that next generation to step up and take KNCO to where they'd like to see it go.
How about you, Bennett Pascal?
Well, before I get to you, Bennett, I have a news flash for everybody. We actually don't hate each other. Because guess what? We all do the same job, and I think we do it for kind of the same reasons. And as far as Ubernet go in the next 3 to 5 years, well, we really want to build on what we have going now. And again, yes, more subscribers, because we will add, there's stuff being added, and who knows what we'll come up with. I mean, is it going to be, are we going to deliver it on different platforms? Who knows? But all these things, nothing's free, but the subscribers also need to recognize that, yeah, for all of us to be sitting here. I mean, I was sitting here, but I was posting on Happening Now that the power has gone out again, the same outage than this morning. Yeah, it's another 3,200 people that are out of power right now. Estimated restoration time, 2 p.m. But we have the passion. We have more people. Now we need the funding to sustain that and actually deliver that, because it is only more and more important to actually deliver the news. And yeah, when we piss everybody off, I mean, right now, I write anything about, Fire Safe Council, and there's both sides are like, you are in the tank for... No, actually not. This is what happened. Here's some facts. You don't like them? That's okay. Do I like them? That's irrelevant. Because actually, I don't have an opinion. I may have facts, but I don't have an opinion. That's not my job. My job is to give you the tools for you to have an opinion, an informed opinion. And I think that's what we all do.
And I want to go back and ask Scott a question, just because I found this part of our pre-conversation really fascinating. One of the things you can read about with particularly radio is that on average about 40% of the people don't have a radio in their house. As you look at young people, it's about 60% of young people that don't even have a radio in their house, right? Car manufacturers are now looking to issue new cars without radio on the dial. So does that worry you?
First of all, a radio for somebody in their 20s and 30s is this phone, right? It's not a traditional radio that you have. I do have to laugh, though. I was talking to Tom Fitzsimmons about this a couple of days ago, because you mentioned this, and he started laughing because he said his wife has 14 radios in her house, which was pretty funny.
So we know he's not normal.
No,
exactly.
Sorry. But so it's the phone, it's your computer, it can be the radio, and at the same time your car. If the towers are out and you can't get and the internet's out, you still can walk and get in your car and tune it in. And the FCC, I think, has actually mandated that they keep AM radio in cars now. Of course, we have AM and we're also on FM. We translate the AM onto our FM too, so you can pick us up. It's just not a great signal on the FM side.
Great. Okay, so do you, several of you have mentioned age, and Scott, you did relative to, ownership and talent, but all you have to do is look at the pages of the paper or online, and you can see that a lot of your contributors are over 50, and certainly there's an age factor. Do you all worry about news audiences aging out?
Well, I could go first on that. I don't. And I was thinking about myself. I moved to this community. I was probably 27, 28 years or 28 years old, something 40 years ago. And at the time, I didn't know what a board of supervisor was. I didn't know what a city council was. I mean, I kind of knew, right? But I didn't really care. I mean, all I wanted to do was go to work and, then get my car and go to the river and have a beer. I mean, that was my life, right? As you get older, you get into your middle and late 30s, I think you start to wake up to your community surroundings and you realize that you're part of the community, and you can make a difference. And so I have hope. I'm going to be sitting with a bunch of 30-year-olds tonight watching the ball game with Sacramento Kings, and we're going to talk about this. And it's some community leaders that are going to be at this thing, and it'll be very interesting to see what their thoughts are on it too. But I hope and trust that as they age, they're going to get more involved in their community.
And I'm seeing nodding here, but I'm going to put Pascal on the spot. There was some Nextdoor research. I don't know if I mentioned this, but research on Nextdoor that looked just specifically at an under 35 group. And they talked about how they get everything they need to know on Nextdoor, and no, they don't feel like they're missing out on local news. And I know you have a lot to say on social media, but I'm wondering if I can just get the highlights of your reaction to that and your thoughts and whether or not that's an issue here in Nevada County.
It is not as much an issue here in Nevada County because even though Nextdoor and Facebook and whatnot are very, a lot of people are talking about a lot of things, it actually starts with them putting a link to our coverage, our collective coverage to it. And then generally it's for them to either criticize and say, oh, hey, yeah, I knew I was right. And it's like, they got it wrong. But it still starts with the local news coverage, and I honestly, I'm not worried because we're working on a series about homeless youth in Nevada County, and even kids that are between the 18 to 25, even if they have incredible challenges, and there's some really horrendous stories out there, they still pay attention to the news because it is for them also something where they can find resources. And that's why local news, we will provide resources. It's like, if you are in this situation, here's where you can go. So they actually still pay attention. And I'm not worried about the aging demographics.
That's great, and really great to hear. We talked about news deserts, and to put a number with that, that's 1,766 counties in this country that do not have local news. So they've been able to research what happens when you don't have local news in the county, and it's actually quite dire. I mean, you heard some conversations here in Pascal's story about the fence going up, but there are facts to prove that local government is less efficient when there's not local news sources. Local government is more corrupt when there isn't local sources. Your tax rate is higher because the borrowing tends to be at a higher rate. And employee wages for government is higher. And so all of this can be researched, right? And it's all out there for you to find. And then, on the softer side, but not unimportant, the thing that you heard here, you're less informed as a voter. So you just don't have the places to go to make good decisions. The other thing that is interesting, and this is not as overwhelming in terms of the research as other areas, but there are fewer local places to shop when you don't have local media. So you heard that they depend on advertising, but you as a consumer know where to go locally. And to the extent that that matters, you're seeing fewer and fewer local places to shop if you don't have strong local media. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about legislation, because in many states around the country, the legislature has done things that actually help local media. So Washington State, where I spent some of my career, actually eliminated business tax for local newspapers and local digital sites and locally owned media. California tends to have gone the other way. And you read a little bit about that in Chad's letter. But there are other examples, and the one that's going on right now I'm going to mention because it's impacting Pascal, and that's the whole issue with Google. There have been bills threatened at the California State Legislature that would require Google and other search firms to pay local media for the content that is searched and returned. And that's happening all around the world, right? It's happening all around the world, but not happening in this country. Google's reaction to that happening at all in this country has already been to pull those searches, so that you can't get the returns that you used to get, because they just don't want to pay and they don't want to start that. So Pascal, I'm going to turn to you because Chad's impacted by this too, but you much more. Talk a little bit about that and talk about the impact of legislation.
Yeah, so the legislation started out with a good sentiment. We want to support local news, so we will find a funding mechanism to support local news. Yay, yes, cool, hey, great. Well, once legislators get together and they Frankenstein a good idea, it is now, if you provide content to California people, we will ask Google to pay basically a link tax. And Google heard that and they were like, well, that's easy. We don't have to feature. We're going to run an experiment and see if we suppress results from California news publishers. And for some stuff right now, if you do a Google search, we will not come up because we are part of the very small test that Google is running. The legislation, there's one bill in the assembly, basically it will benefit not local news, not local media. It's going to benefit anybody who provides content in California. That could be an HBO documentary. That can be any of the network TV stations. It can be any chain. And so instead of having something that's geared toward local news and maybe local businesses, this is something that personally, I oppose it because it's not helpful for anybody, and all it's going to do is it's going to give basically more money to the ABC, NBC, CBS, etc.
So I'm going to put words in your mouth here. So you don't support the legislation, but you don't support how Google has responded either.
Oh, absolutely not,
Right.
because let's face it, Google, you are the product on social media and you are the product on Google, so it's like. No, I don't support their reaction because yes, they could definitely do something, and they do some stuff for Google News Initiative, etc. But they could do so much more.
And Chad, do you want to talk for a second about the legislation and how that impacted you that was recently passed? And maybe I would ask you to add the whole public notices threat, which comes out every year as well from the legislature.
Yeah, obviously with AB 5, which was kind of started. Again, with good intentions. It was really, the GIG Act was looking at Lyft and Uber drivers and their diminished wages compared to what the executives of said organizations were getting. So it was really trying to even that playing field. And then, to quote Pascal, it was Frankensteined into any sort of non-employee contractor that is part of your daily operation. It's exhausting. And that is obviously why we had to change our delivery method, and which affected everyone who subscribes to the newspaper. And then we are a newspaper that posts legal notices, and that is a governmental requirement. And that's one of those extra hoops that we jump through because, frankly, that is part of our revenue model. All those legal postings generate revenue, and they are required by, state, county government to be posted, and that's something that they are looking at allowing other media outlets to handle, allowing them to be ran for fewer times, which really affects, again, it goes back to affecting that revenue and allowing us to continue providing the coverage that the county and the community wants.
So public notices are things like, fictitious names and bids being accepted, those sorts of things. And it was designed so that the public knows what's going on with government. And there has, for a generation, been the requirement that you publish that in a way that can actually get out to consumers. So that's the piece that comes up almost every year with do we really need to do that anymore? And the legislature so far has not voted on it, but the newspaper and other groups get involved in that. This AB 5, just for clarity, took a look at independent contractors and impacted, what Chad would have had to have done is make all of his carriers an employee if he didn't want to change the business cycle. It's also impacted journalists. And the number that I didn't give you earlier, but 43,000 journalists have lost their jobs in the last decade, and this caused even more in California. They don't know the exact number yet, but because journalists who were acting as stringers and things now can no longer operate in that way. And so I think it's important for you all to understand, because we're going to move back into the segment of what you can do if you care about local media, but I do think it's important to understand that there are external forces as well. And legislatively in California, it's been a more difficult place to operate, which is why you don't see as many, headquarters here and things that you see in other states. So I think that's an important thing. But let's end on a little bit happier note. And so actually, let me ask this. Is there any pending legislation that you're watching right now? Chad, no. Scott, no. Pascal, no. Yeah. So there were just 400 bills introduced last week, and I didn't follow that too closely. So I thought I would at least ask the open-ended question. Okay, well, let's get back to what the community can do to preserve local media and a robust local media. And I'm going to start with a really unfair yes or no question to set the stage. And Chad, I'll put you on the spot first. Yes or no, do you think the media landscape here is going to change over the next 5 years?
Yes.
Scott?
Overall, yes.
Pascal?
No.
Okay, good. I'm glad we don't have so what can the community do to help change these two? I really mean that, but to ensure that whatever changes happen don't happen to the detriment of the community itself. Who wants to take that first? Pascal?
So just to prove them wrong, you have to keep them in business. And how do you keep them in business? Shop local, subscribe, support. That's basically, because when I said no, the media landscape, I think there might be new players popping up. Well, it's possible. It has happened before. It's going to happen again. But fundamentally, I don't think it's going to change a lot. However, for it to be vibrant and growing, that's on you. We'll put that on you. We'll continue doing our job, but yeah, we need the community to understand how we work, and it's not just money. It's also, yes, talk to us, reach out to us, because again, we don't get the news through osmosis, but I'm fairly optimistic.
One of my favorite Rotary facts used to be that in the 1800s, when a lot of these newspapers were created, the Sacramento Bee went for about 10 cents a day. If you put an inflationary rate on that and just charged the same amount, and by the way, in those days, it was 4 pages for 10 cents. Today, on a daily basis, you would pay almost $6 a day. So part of the pricing challenge that you're feeling with newspapers, they brought on themselves because they got more reliant on the advertising model and got away from. And, to the point Chad was making earlier about Hulu or cable or whatever, if you spent anywhere near on your local media what you spent on that on a monthly basis, they'd be fine. All right. So what can this group do to help you?
Again, back to my other point, and from my perspective, that next generation needs to get involved in the local radio station. I think it's incredibly important, and I think they're going to take it to places that I can't even fathom at this moment in time. And there's just so many things you can do with this particular media, and to make it better. And I'm hopeful that a group or the right individual will step up and make it happen.
How about for the union?
Obviously, what Pascal said is true. Spend your money wisely, spend it locally. On top of that, be a contributor. You're upset about something, write a letter, let us know. We have lots of opportunities for that. Another thing is, if you see something going on, take a picture of it, because that whatever it is existing in that moment, and unless we have a writer right there on that, covering it at that moment, that picture can never be reproduced. We're going to have to follow up and get some history to create a story anyway, but having a picture of what exactly that event is and submitting it to any of us is super helpful. People love pictures, and that just develops that story much more. So I think for all of us, get involved, talk about what's going on. Did you see what was on Ubinet? Did you hear what was just on the radio? Did you see what was on the front page of the paper? Start those conversations, continue those conversations. I think that just keeps that local media top of mind, which is what we need.
So subscribe, shop locally. When you walk into an advertiser, tell them you saw their ad. And all of these guys like your story tips. Thank you so much. Help me say thank you to these three for being so informative. And I know they'll all stick around for a minute or two if you have anything in particular you want to bend their ear about. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the steering committee, if you guys will all raise your hands, who helped put this all together. I get the glory. And of course, Dorian over here and Mike, who's doing our video. There will be a video of this on the website, the Sierra College Foundation website, in the next week or so. SierraCollege.edu/NCC. If you didn't get it, it'll be out there. I was going to say it'd be on the video, but if you did get it, you couldn't go to the video, right? So that wasn't very smart. Our next session will be on May 24th, and we'll be talking to local law enforcement officers about the challenges that they face in a variety of areas and what keeps them up at night. Again, thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, guys.